Chapter 6. The psychology of rivalry. The farmer can build the well. He can throw in the bait. He can create the pressure. He can stand above and wait. But the trap does not work by structure alone. Something inside the mice must respond. Something inside them must turn hunger into suspicion. Suspicion into rivalry. Rivalry into violence. Violence into a new way of life. This is why we must now move from strategy into psychology. Because divide and rule is not powerful only because rulers understand power. It is powerful because it uses things already present inside human beings. Fear, desire, pride, envy, humiliation, resentment, the need to belong, the need to survive, the need to feel important, the need to believe that one's suffering has an explanation. These forces live inside every society. The farmer does not create them from nothing. He arranges them. He feeds them. He gives them a direction. He creates the conditions where they grow wild. If Chapter 5 showed us the ancient strategy, Chapter 6 must ask a deeper question. Why does the strategy work? Why do people so easily turn against those nearest to them? Why does a coworker attack another coworker, instead of questioning the system that makes both of them insecure? Why does one poor person despise another poor person instead of asking us why poverty has been made so normal? Why does a citizen hate a neighbor from another tribe, party, religion, race, or region more than the leaders who benefit from that hatred? Why do people sometimes protect the system that wounds them and attack the people wounded beside them? To answer this, we must begin with fear. Fear is one of the oldest forces in the human body. It is not always bad. Fear can protect life. Fear can make a person run from danger. Fear can make a parent protect a child. Fear can make a community prepare before disaster. Fear can sharpen attention. Fear can wake people up. But fear can also narrow the mind. A frightened person often sees less, not more. He may see the immediate threat, but miss the larger pattern. He may see the person in front of him, but miss the structure around him. He may see the hand reaching for the same opportunity, but miss the one who made opportunities scarce. This is why fear is so useful to manipulation. Fear creates urgency, and urgency reduces reflection. A calm person may ask questions. A frightened person wants safety. A calm worker may ask whether the system is fair. A frightened worker asks how to avoid being fired. A calm citizen may examine policy. A frightened citizen looks for a protector. A calm community may discuss history. A frightened community looks for an enemy. This is the first psychological law of the well. Fear makes the nearest target look like the real target. The mouse beside you becomes more visible than the farmer above you. The coworker beside you becomes more visible than the employer's structure. The neighbor beside you becomes more visible than the political system. The rival student beside you becomes more visible than the scarcity of scholarships. The other creator beside you becomes more visible than the algorithm rewarding conflict. Fear reduces the world. It makes life feel like a room with only two choices: attack or be attacked, eat or be eaten, dominate or disappear. This is the Hobbesian world. Thomas Hobbes described human life under insecurity as a condition where everyone fears everyone else. He was concerned with what happens when there is no trusted authority to keep peace. In such a condition, even a person who does not want violence may prepare for violence because he suspects others are preparing for it too. This is very important. Sometimes conflict grows not because everyone is naturally aggressive, but because everyone is afraid that everyone else will become aggressive first. So each person arms himself emotionally. Each person becomes defensive. Each person hides information. Each person protects his advantage. Each person interprets the other person's move as a threat. Then the fear becomes self-fulfilling. Because I fear you will betray me, I betray you first. Because you fear I will attack, you attack first. Because I expect hostility, I behave with hostility. Because I behave with hostility, you see proof that I was dangerous, and so the circle continues. This is how rivalry becomes rational inside a sick environment. Outside the well, trust may be reasonable. Inside the well, suspicion feels reasonable. That is the tragedy. The trap does not always make people irrational. Sometimes it creates a world where destructive behavior begins to feel rational. This is why telling people, just be kind, is not enough. Kindness matters. But if the structure rewards cruelty and punishes trust, kindness becomes costly. A person may want to cooperate, but if he believes everyone else will exploit his cooperation, he may choose self-protection instead. This is how systems educate behavior. A corrupt system teaches people that honesty is foolish. A violent system teaches people that gentleness is dangerous. A humiliating system teaches people that dignity must be defended through aggression. A scarcity system teaches people that another person's gain is your loss. A suspicious system teaches people that trust is childish. Over time, people stop saying, "This system is sick," they say, "This is reality." And when sickness becomes reality, healing begins to look naive. This is why the psychology of rivalry is so dangerous. It does not only change behavior, it changes common sense. It teaches people to call cruelty wisdom. It teaches people to call envy justice. It teaches people to call suspicion intelligence. It teaches people to call domination leadership. It teaches people to call emotional numbness strength. The second force is desire. René Girard helps us here. Girard's great insight was that human desire is often imitative. We do not only want things because of the things themselves, we often want things because others want them. A child may ignore a toy until another child picks it up. A student may not care about a prize until classmates begin competing for it. A worker may not desire a title deeply until others respect the person who has it. A young person may not desire a lifestyle until social media presents it as proof of worth. A community may not feel inferior until another community is publicly ranked above it. Desire grows through comparison, and comparison is one of the quiet engines of rivalry. The well does not need to contain many things. It only needs to contain one thing everyone begins to desire. In the parable, the object is meat. In society, it may be a job, a promotion, a political seat, a contract, a scholarship, a relationship, a piece of land, a government post, a title, a rank, a following, a lifestyle, a reputation, an inheritance, a sign of being chosen. Once many people desire the same scarce thing, rivalry begins. At first, the rival appears as someone similar to you. That is important. We often envy people who are close enough to compare with us. The very rich person far away may not trouble us as much as the neighbor who is slightly ahead. The international celebrity may not wound us as much as the old classmate who now seems successful. The distant politician may not provoke us as much as the co-worker who was promoted before us. The stranger in another country may not disturb us as much as the sibling who received more praise. Rivalry is often strongest among the near. Why? Because the near person becomes a mirror. He shows us what we might have been. She shows us what we think we deserved. They show us a version of life that feels close enough to touch, but far enough to hurt. This is why the mice attack each other. They do not attack the clouds, they attack what is near. Human beings do the same. A poor person may not know how to attack the economic structure, but he can attack another poor person. A worker may not know how to challenge institutional culture, but he can sabotage a coworker. A citizen may not know how to transform the state, but he can hate a neighbor. A family member may not know how to heal generational wounds, but he can fight a sibling. Rivalry often travels along proximity. This is one of the farmer's secrets. He does not need to make people hate those far away. He needs to make them fear and envy those closest to them, because those are the people they can reach. Girard would say that the rival is not only an obstacle, the rival is also a model. We want what the rival appears to have, then we resent the rival for having taught us to want it. This is why rivalry can become obsessive. The rival seems to possess not only the object, but the meaning of the object. The job becomes more than a job, it becomes proof of worth. The promotion becomes more than salary, it becomes recognition. The political position becomes more than leadership, it becomes identity. The relationship becomes more than love, it becomes victory. The follower count becomes more than numbers, it becomes existence. The title becomes more than a word, it becomes dignity. When objects carry too much meaning, rivalry becomes spiritual. People are no longer fighting only for things, they are fighting for the right to feel real. The farmer understands this, even if he has never read Girard. He knows that people can be controlled by what they believe gives them worth. So he makes worth scarce, he makes recognition scarce, he makes opportunity scarce. He makes respect scarce. He makes security scarce. Then he watches people fight for symbols. This is why humiliation is the third force. Humiliation is not the same as pain. Pain hurts. Humiliation lowers. Pain says, I am suffering. Humiliation says, I am nothing. A humiliated person does not only want relief, he wants restoration. He wants to feel seen again. He wants to feel powerful again. He wants to feel that the shame has been answered. This can lead to dignity. A person can respond to humiliation by becoming disciplined, wise, compassionate, and morally serious. But humiliation can also become resentment. Resentment is pain that has found someone to blame. It is memory mixed with anger. It is wounded pride waiting for permission to strike. A resentful person may not simply want justice. He may want reversal. He may want the person who made him feel small to become small. He may want others to taste the shame he tasted. He may want a world where he is no longer below, even if that means placing someone else below him. This is how victims can become oppressors, not because victimhood naturally produces cruelty, but because unhealed humiliation can make domination feel like healing. The former victim says, "Now it is my turn. I suffered, so they must suffer. No one helped me, so I will not help them. I was crushed, so I will crush. I was ignored, so I will make them fear me." This is the voice of the well speaking through the survivor. It is the voice of the last mouse. Viktor Frankl gives us the antidote here. Frankl does not deny suffering. He does not romanticize it. He knew suffering in one of the darkest contexts of modern history, but he insisted that the human being must not surrender the inner freedom to choose what suffering means. This is not easy. It is not sentimental. It is not a motivational slogan. It is a moral discipline. Frankl's insight forces us to ask, will my suffering make me more human or less human? Will my humiliation become compassion or cruelty? Will my pain become responsibility or revenge? Will I let the well define the whole meaning of my life? The farmer wants people to interpret suffering in the most useful way for him. He wants the humiliated person to seek revenge against the nearest target. He wants the frightened person to seek protection from the manipulator. He wants the insecure person to compete for approval. He wants the resentful person to join the mob. He wants the wounded person to become a weapon. Frankl interrupts this. He says, in effect, even here, even under pressure, even in suffering, there remains a human task. You must decide what kind of person you will become. This is why the psychology of rivalry must always include moral freedom. If we only say people are manipulated, we reduce them to objects. If we only say people choose freely, we ignore the force of the trap. The truth is more difficult. People are shaped by conditions, but they also respond to conditions. They are wounded, but they can choose what to do with the wound. They are pressured, but they can question the pressure. They are tempted, but they can examine the temptation. They are afraid, but they can ask whether fear is selecting the wrong enemy. The fourth force is belonging. Human beings do not only want food and safety, they want a group. They want a we. They want to know where they stand. They want to be recognized by others. They want to belong to something bigger than themselves. This need can be beautiful. It creates family, community, friendship, nation, faith, teamwork, solidarity. But the need to belong can also be manipulated. A person who feels lonely may accept a hateful group because hatred feels better than isolation. A person who feels invisible may join a movement that gives him identity, even if that identity is built on contempt. A person who feels powerless may accept a leader who gives him enemies, because enemies make the group feel united. This is one of Orwell's great warnings. In 1984, hatred is not random. It is organized. People are given a common enemy. Their emotions are synchronized. Their anger becomes a form of belonging. This is terrifying because it shows that people can feel united while being controlled. They may think they are expressing themselves when in fact their emotions have been scripted. They may think they are brave when they are only participating in a ritual designed by power. They may think they are awake when they are being directed. This is why crowds are dangerous when they stop thinking. A crowd can give courage, but it can also remove conscience. Inside a crowd, a person may do what he would be ashamed to do alone. He may shout words he would never say in private. He may support cruelty because everyone around him is cheering. He may surrender judgment to the emotional temperature of the group. Girard's scapegoat theory also helps us here. A divided group can suddenly become united when it finds a common victim. This unity feels powerful, but it is false unity. It is unity through sacrifice. The group says, "We are together because we all hate them." That kind of unity is dangerous because it requires an enemy to survive. When one enemy is destroyed, another must be found. The well must keep feeding on someone. This is why societies built on hatred never become peaceful. They only change targets. Today's enemy is one group, tomorrow's enemy is another. The crowd needs someone to blame because blaming protects the crowd from examining itself. The fifth force is envy. Envy is more than wanting what another person has. Envy carries pain at the sight of another person's good. It says, "Why them? Why not me? What makes them special? They do not deserve it. I would rather see it destroyed than see them enjoy it." Envy is one of the quietest but most destructive forces inside the well. It does not always shout. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it congratulates in public and curses in private. Sometimes it wears the language of fairness while secretly desiring destruction. Sometimes it pretends to seek justice when it really seeks humiliation of the successful. This is why envy is dangerous in communities under scarcity. When opportunity is rare, another person's success can feel like theft. When recognition is rare, another person's praise can feel like personal insult. When love is scarce in a family, one child's favor can feel like another child's rejection. When national resources are distributed unfairly, one region's development can feel like another region's abandonment. The farmer uses envy by making people compare constantly. He displays rewards. He gives selective favors. He praises one publicly and ignores another. He promotes one worker mysteriously. He funds one community visibly. He gives one child attention and leaves another hungry for affection. He shows people what others have, but hides how the system works. Then resentment grows. People may not ask for fairness. They may ask for the other person to fall. That is when envy has become destructive. Justice says, let everyone have dignity. Envy says, if I cannot rise, let them fall. Justice wants repair. Envy wants reversal. Justice can build. Envy only burns. The sixth force is meaning. Human beings cannot suffer meaninglessly for long. When people suffer, they search for explanation. Why am I poor? Why was I rejected? Why did I fail? Why was my group humiliated? Why do others rise while I remain behind? Why do I feel invisible? Why has life been unfair? These are serious questions. If answered wisely, they can lead to maturity. If answered falsely, they can lead to hatred. This is why the farmer gives people ready-made explanations. He says, you are suffering because of that group. You are poor because they took your chance. You are unsafe because they exist. You are humiliated because they are rising. You failed because they conspired. You are nothing because they stole your place. Sometimes there may be truth in people's grievances. Real injustice exists. Real exploitation exists. Real discrimination exists. Real corruption exists. Real betrayal exists. But the farmer's method is to take pain, mix it with partial truth, and direct it toward a target that protects his own power. A lie mixed with a little truth is often more dangerous than a pure lie. People reject pure lies more easily, but a partial truth can capture wounded people because it touches something real. This is why serious thinking is necessary. We must not dismiss people's pain, but we must also not accept every explanation given to pain. Pain is real, but pain can be misinterpreted. Anger is real, but anger can be misdirected. Suffering is real, but suffering can be used. This is one of the central lessons of the psychology of rivalry. The person who controls the meaning of your pain can control the direction of your life. If he tells you your pain means you must hate your neighbor, you may become his soldier. If he tells you your pain means you must betray your coworkers, you may become his instrument. If he tells you your pain means you must despise the weak, you may become a servant of cruelty. If he tells you your pain means life is only domination, you may become a farmer yourself. But if you interpret your pain differently, the trap weakens. You may say, my suffering does not give me permission to dehumanize others. My poverty does not require me to hate another poor person. My humiliation does not require me to humiliate others. My fear does not choose my enemy. My wound does not decide my character. This is where rivalry begins to lose power. Not because all problems disappear, but because consciousness returns. The seventh force is scarcity. Scarcity is not only a material condition, it is also a mental climate. There can be real scarcity, not enough food, jobs, land, medicine, safety, or money. But there can also be manufactured scarcity. Opportunities deliberately limited, information hidden, rewards distributed through favoritism, attention made competitive, love made conditional. Recognition given to one person to control many others. Real scarcity causes suffering. Manufactured scarcity creates control. In both cases, scarcity changes behavior. When people believe something necessary is limited, they begin to calculate. Who has access? Who is closer to power? Who is taking more? Who is blocking me? Who must I defeat? Who must I please? Who must I betray? Scarcity turns life into a narrow gate, and when the gate is narrow, people begin pushing. But the most dangerous scarcity is not always scarcity of things. It is scarcity of dignity. When people feel there is not enough dignity to go around, they begin stealing it from one another. They mock, they belittle, they dominate, they exclude, they shame, they gossip, they humiliate. They make others feel small in order to feel large. This is common in trapped communities. People who feel powerless may create small kingdoms. A senior student humiliates a junior student. A supervisor humiliates a cleaner. A wealthy relative humiliates poorer relatives. A political supporter humiliates the opposing side. A person with small authority uses it harshly because somewhere inside, he remembers powerlessness. This is how the well reproduces itself. Every wounded person builds a smaller well for someone else, unless consciousness interrupts the pattern. This is why the psychology of rivalry must not only explain conflict, it must point toward liberation. How does a person resist rivalry? First, by slowing down. The trap needs speed. It needs reaction. It needs immediate anger. It needs people to respond before they reflect. So the first act of freedom is pause. Pause before believing the enemy you are given. Pause before joining the crowd. Pause before forwarding the rumor. Pause before attacking the person who seems to be in your way. Pause before calling envy justice. Pause before calling fear wisdom. Pause before calling cruelty strength. In that pause, a person can ask, what am I feeling? Who gave me this interpretation? What facts do I have? Who benefits if I hate this person? Is this person the cause of my suffering or simply near my suffering? Am I seeking justice or just relief from humiliation? Is this conflict real, exaggerated, or manufactured? Second, by naming the structure. A person trapped in rivalry often sees only individuals, but freedom requires seeing systems, not to excuse individuals, but to understand patterns. If every worker is afraid, perhaps the problem is not one worker's attitude. If every sibling feels wounded, perhaps the family system has distributed love unfairly. If every community feels neglected, perhaps politics has turned public resources into private reward. If every student is terrified of failure, perhaps the education system has confused ranking with learning. If every creator is angry and anxious, perhaps the platform rewards emotional extremes. Naming the structure helps people stop personalizing everything. It moves attention from who do I hate to what is producing this behavior. Third, by refusing scapegoats. This does not mean refusing accountability. Wrongdoing must be named. But scapegoating is different from accountability. Accountability says, this person did this harm and justice requires response. Scapegoating says, this person or group is the source of all our disorder, and destroying them will purify us. Accountability is specific. Scapegoating is total. Accountability seeks repair. Scapegoating seeks emotional release. Accountability examines facts. Scapegoating feeds on myth. Accountability can lead to justice. Scapegoating leads to repetition. Fourth, by building shared goals. Sheriff's Robbers Cave study showed that hostility reduced when rival groups faced tasks that required cooperation. This matters deeply. People do not overcome rivalry only by being told to love one another. They need shared work, shared danger, shared responsibility, shared projects, shared institutions, shared goals that make cooperation practical. In a workplace, this means reward systems that honor teamwork, not sabotage. In a society, it means public institutions that treat citizens as citizens, not as competing tribes. In a family, it means transparency, fairness, and honest conversation. In education, it means learning that develops dignity, not only rank. In politics, it means leadership that solves problems rather than harvesting resentment. In communities, it means projects where people see that the neighbor is not an enemy but a partner in survival. The mice in the well needed a shared goal, escape, but hunger kept turning them into rivals. Human beings must learn what the mice could not. The other person's survival may be connected to mine. The fifth way to resist rivalry is moral memory. People must remember who they were before the trap. They must remember values older than fear. They must remember teachings that protect humanity. They must remember elders who warned against hatred. They must remember religious, cultural, and moral traditions that say the neighbor is not food. They must remember moments when cooperation saved them. They must remember that survival without humanity is not victory. This is where Frankl speaks again. A person can be stripped of many things, but if he can protect the final freedom to choose his response, then the trap has not fully conquered him. The farmer wants total capture. He wants the person's body, behavior, emotion, imagination, and meaning. But the human being can resist at the level of meaning. He can say, I will not let this suffering turn me into what wounded me. That sentence is revolutionary. It does not remove pain, but it prevents pain from becoming master. Chapter 6 is about rivalry, but it is also about possibility. Because rivalry is not destiny. Fear is powerful but not final. Envy is powerful but not final. Humiliation is powerful but not final. Scarcity is powerful but not final. Propaganda is powerful but not final. The crowd is powerful but not final. Even the well is powerful but not final. What matters is whether consciousness can return before the last mouse is all that remains. If people can see their fear, they can question it. If they can see their envy, they can purify it. If they can see their humiliation, they can heal it before it becomes cruelty. If they can see the scapegoat mechanism, they can refuse the false victim. If they can see the structure, they can stop blaming only the nearest person. If they can see the farmer, they can stop serving his design. And if they can see one another again, not as food, not as rivals, not as categories, but as fellow beings inside a shared condition, then something new becomes possible. Not perfect peace, not instant unity, not naive trust, but the beginning of another kind of life. A life where people do not allow fear to choose their enemies. A life where pain is not automatically converted into hatred. A life where success does not require another person's humiliation. A life where leadership is judged by whether it reduces fear or feeds it. A life where people understand that not every rival is an enemy. A life where the question who benefits from this division becomes common wisdom. That is what the farmer fears, not emotional people. Emotional people are easy to use, not angry people. Angry people are easy to aim, not desperate people. Desperate people are easy to bargain with. The farmer fears conscious people, people who feel deeply but think clearly, people who suffer but refuse false meaning, people who are angry but ask where the anger should go, people who are wounded but refuse to become weapons, people who can look at the one beside them and say, you may not be my enemy, you may be trapped with me. That sentence can begin to break the spell. The psychology of rivalry teaches us why people fight, but it also teaches us where freedom begins. Freedom begins when we stop obeying every emotion as if it were truth. Freedom begins when we stop confusing proximity with causality. Freedom begins when we stop mistaking the nearest person for the deepest problem. Freedom begins when we refuse to let humiliation become cruelty. Freedom begins when we recover the power to interpret our own suffering. Freedom begins when we ask, is this my enemy? Or is this the person the trap wants me to hate? The farmer built the well. The ancient strategist understood the method. The human mind explains why the method works. But now we must move from theory to history, because the divide trap is not only a story. It has appeared in empires, colonies, nations, institutions, and communities. It has shaped real people. It has broken real societies. It has produced wounds that lasted long after the original farmer disappeared. And so the next chapter must ask, what happens when the well becomes a country? Chapter 7. When the well becomes a country, a well does not always look like a hole in the ground. Sometimes it looks like a nation. Sometimes it looks like a colony. Sometimes it looks like a political party. Sometimes it looks like a workplace. Sometimes it looks like a school system. Sometimes it looks like a family. Sometimes it looks like a digital platform where millions of people are trapped together, not by stone walls, but by fear, identity, comparison, and anger. The parable of the mice becomes more serious when we stop imagining a small dry well and begin to see how whole societies can be arranged like wells. This does not mean every society is a trap. It does not mean every conflict is engineered. It does not mean every group that fights has been manipulated from outside. Human history is more complicated than that. People fight because of land, memory, injustice, greed, trauma, pride, religion, ideology, revenge, poverty, ambition, and fear. Sometimes they fight because real harm has been done. Sometimes they fight because leaders have failed. Sometimes they fight because institutions are weak. Sometimes they fight because truth itself has been poisoned. But inside these many causes, there is a pattern that appears again and again. When power benefits from division, division becomes policy. When leadership benefits from fear, fear becomes language. When institutions benefit from rivalry, rivalry becomes culture. When elites benefit from confusion, confusion becomes normal. That is when the well becomes a country. A country becomes a well when people trapped inside the same political structure are taught to see each other as the deepest threat. A country becomes a well when citizens stop asking, "Why are we all suffering?" and begin asking, "Which group should we blame?" A country becomes a well when people cannot imagine national problems except through tribe, religion, race, region, class, party, or identity. A country becomes a well when politics no longer organizes hope but organizes hatred. A country becomes a well when the ordinary person is given enemies instead of justice. This is where colonial history becomes important. Empires had a problem. They were often small ruling minorities trying to control very large populations. A small number of foreign officials could not govern millions of people by force alone forever. Force was expensive. Constant war was risky. Direct control required too many administrators, too many soldiers, too much money, and too much resistance. So empire often learned to govern indirectly. It learned to use existing local structures. It learned to select certain chiefs, kings, collaborators, interpreters, clerks, soldiers, and local elites. It learned to classify people. It learned to turn flexible identities into fixed administrative categories. It learned to rule through difference. The American Historical Association describes British indirect rule in African colonies as a system that used existing tribal structures and traditions as conduits for colonial administration, while British officials remained behind the scenes and retained veto power. This is important because the colonial ruler did not always need to appear everywhere. He could govern through local authority while still shaping the larger structure. This is one way a well becomes political. The people inside may see the local chief, the tax collector, the rival clan, the favored region, or the neighboring ethnic group. But above them is a wider structure arranging authority, reward, punishment, and access. Mahmoud Mamdani is one of the most important writers for understanding this in Africa. In Citizen and Subject, Mamdani argued that colonial rule in Africa often produced a divided political order. Some people were governed as citizens under civil law, while many rural populations were governed through customary authority under what he called decentralized despotism. A review of Mamdani's work describes this dual system of rule as one colonial powers adopted after testing different methods of controlling colonized populations. This matters because it shows that colonialism did not only extract resources, it also shaped political identity. It shaped how people understood authority. It shaped who could speak for a community. It shaped who was called native, subject, citizen, tribe, loyal, backward, civilized, traditional, or modern. These labels did not simply describe people, they govern people. A label can become a wall. A category can become a well. When people are governed primarily through identity, they may begin to experience identity as competition. Who gets access to education? Who gets recruited into administration? Who is trusted by the state? Who is seen as loyal? Who is taxed through which authority? Who is allowed to move? Who is represented? Who is ignored? Who becomes the intermediary? Who becomes the subject? This does not mean colonial rulers invented every identity or every conflict. That would be false. African societies had complex histories before colonialism. Kingdoms, clans, languages, religions, trade networks, wars, alliances, migrations, and forms of authority. People were not blank pages waiting for Europeans to write on them. But colonial rule often reorganized these histories through administrative power. It hardened some differences. It rewarded some identities. It weakened some institutions. It empowered some local authorities. It ignored others. It created artificial borders. It connected political advantage to group classification. And once political advantage becomes attached to identity, identity becomes dangerous. Because then people do not only ask, "Who am I?" They ask, "What does my identity give me? Who does my identity protect me from? Who does my identity put me against? What do I lose if another group rises?" This is how culture can be turned into competition. This is how belonging can be turned into fear. This is how a people can inherit a well long after the original farmer has gone. But we must be careful. A serious mind must not use colonialism as an excuse for everything. Post-colonial leaders also make choices. Local elites make choices. Citizens make choices. Parties make choices. Religious leaders make choices. Media houses make choices. Militias make choices. Families make choices. Colonial history may dig wells, but later leaders may deepen them. They may learn from the old farmer. They may discover that division works. They may inherit categories and then weaponize them again. They may speak the language of liberation while practicing the method of domination. This is one of the tragedies of history. Sometimes those who suffered under divide and rule later use divide and rule to survive in power. The farmer changes color. The method remains. A leader who cannot deliver development may deliver enemies. A leader who cannot build hospitals may build suspicion. A leader who cannot create jobs may create scapegoats. A leader who cannot unite people through justice may unite one group through fear of another. This is how the country becomes a well. The people are told, you are poor because of them. You are unsafe because of them. You are forgotten because of them. You are losing your place because of them. You cannot trust them. If they rise, you fall. If they win, you disappear. If they speak, you are under attack. The message does not need to be fully true. It only needs to touch an existing wound. A lie that touches a real wound can travel faster than a truth that requires patience. This is why Rwanda must be handled with great seriousness. The 1994 genocide against the Tutsi was not caused by one simple factor. It involved colonial history, ethnic classification, post-colonial politics, civil war, extremist leadership, propaganda, fear, organized militias, state structures, and international failure. Any explanation that reduces it to one cause is irresponsible. But it is relevant to our theme because it shows how identity, fear, propaganda, and organized power can turn neighbors into enemies. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum states that in 1994, between 500,000 and 1 million Rwandans were massacred when a Hutu extremist-led government launched a plan to wipe out the Tutsi minority and others who opposed its policies. That sentence must be read slowly. A government, a plan, a minority targeted, opponents also killed. This was not spontaneous anger alone. It was organized destruction. It was the transformation of political fear into mass violence. In such moments, the well becomes a nation, and the farmer becomes a machinery of propaganda, administration, militia, fear, and obedience. The neighbor is no longer seen as a neighbor. The human being becomes a category. The category becomes a threat. The threat becomes a target. And the target becomes killable. This is the final horror of divide and rule when joined with dehumanization. It does not merely make people disagree. It makes people unable to recognize the humanity of those beside them. That is why labels are dangerous when they are joined to fear. A label can organize memory, but it can also organize murder. A name can preserve identity, but it can also become a mark. A political category can help people demand rights, but it can also be used to deny rights. A group identity can create belonging, but it can also become a cage. This is where Orwell becomes important again. Orwell understood that power works through language. If a system can control the words people use, it can shape the world they see. If it can name the enemy, simplify the story, repeat the slogan, and narrow the imagination, it can make cruelty feel necessary. Propaganda does not only lie, it trains attention. It tells people what to notice. It tells people what to ignore. It tells people whom to fear. It tells people whom to pity. It tells people whose suffering counts. It tells people whose death is acceptable. It tells people what questions are forbidden. In the well, propaganda would tell each mouse, the mouse beside you is the reason you are hungry. The mouse beside you is planning to eat you. The mouse beside you is not like you. The mouse beside you deserves what is coming. The farmer does not need to say, look up. He needs them to keep looking sideways. The same pattern can happen at a smaller scale inside institutions. A workplace can become a well. Imagine an office where everyone is underpaid, overworked, insecure, and afraid of losing their job. Management does not clearly communicate. Promotions are secret. Rewards are selective. Mistakes are punished publicly. Information is shared unevenly. One employee is praised in front of another. One department is blamed for failures caused by poor leadership. People begin to whisper, they stop trusting, they hide knowledge, they sabotage, they compete for closeness to power. They become more focused on surviving each other than improving the organization. The office may still have chairs, computers, meetings, and motivational posters, but psychologically, it has become a well. The farmer may be one manager, or the farmer may be the incentive system. This distinction is important. Sometimes manipulation has a face. Sometimes it is built into the rules. A company can create a system where workers must compete so brutally that betrayal becomes rational. A school can create a system where children believe their classmates' success is their personal defeat. A political party can create a system where loyalty matters more than truth. A social media platform can create a system where outrage receives more visibility than wisdom. A family can create a system where love is distributed through comparison, so siblings spend years fighting for emotional survival. In each case, the well is a structure of incentives. What is rewarded? What is punished? What is hidden? What is made scarce? What emotions are amplified? What questions are discouraged? What kind of person rises? Every system produces a human type. A fearful system produces fearful people. A corrupt system produces calculating people. A humiliating system produces defensive people. A divided system produces suspicious people. A violent system produces hardened people. A just system does not produce perfect people, but it makes dignity more possible. That is why politics matters. That is why leadership matters. That is why institutions matter. That is why family culture matters. That is why digital design matters. The well is not only a metaphor, it is a design question. What kind of human beings does this system produce? If a country produces citizens who cannot trust one another, we must ask what kind of political culture has trained them. If a school produces students who fear failure more than they love learning, we must ask what kind of education they received. If a workplace produces employees who sabotage each other, we must ask what the management rewards. If a family produces siblings who cannot sit together without suspicion, we must ask how love, property, truth, and attention were distributed. If a platform produces public humiliation every day, we must ask what kind of behavior the algorithm rewards. This is why Muzafer Sherif's Robbers Cave experiment is still useful, even though it was not a country, colony, or political system. Sherif and his colleagues divided boys into groups, built group identities, introduced competitive conditions, and watched hostility grow. Later, when the groups had to cooperate around shared goals, hostility reduced. A summary of the study explains that competitive tasks led to hostility, while cooperative tasks reduced conflict, showing the role of shared goals in resolving group tensions. This does not explain all wars. It does not explain all political violence. It does not explain every historical conflict, but it reveals a principle. The structure of interaction matters. Put people into competition over scarce rewards and hostility may grow. Give people shared problems that require cooperation and hostility can reduce. This is one of the strongest answers to the well. If the well creates rivalry, escape requires shared purpose. Not speeches alone, not slogans alone, not sentimental calls for unity alone. Shared purpose, shared institutions, shared justice, shared work, shared truth, shared responsibility. People do not overcome division only by being told to love one another. They need conditions where trust becomes practical again. A country divided by identity needs institutions that treat people fairly as citizens. A workplace divided by competition needs reward systems that honor collaboration. A family divided by secrecy needs transparency and honest conversation. A digital space divided by outrage needs designs that do not profit from constant hostility. A community divided by poverty needs real opportunity, not only moral lectures. A nation wounded by history needs truth, justice, memory, and repair. Without these, unity becomes a slogan painted on the wall of the well. This is one of the mistakes many leaders make. They tell people to unite without changing the conditions that divide them. They tell citizens to love each other while distributing resources unfairly. They tell workers to be a team while rewarding individual sabotage. They tell students to cooperate while ranking them in ways that humiliate the majority. They tell communities to forgive while hiding truth. They tell families to be peaceful while protecting the person who created the conflict. Unity without justice is not healing. It is silence. Peace without truth is not peace. It is pressure waiting for another explosion. This is where Frankl's wisdom must be joined with political realism. Frankl reminds us that individuals have moral freedom even under suffering. But social thinkers remind us that environments still matter. A person must choose dignity. But systems must not be designed to crush dignity every day. A person must refuse hatred. But leaders must not manufacture hatred for political profit. A person must not become the last mouse. But society must stop building wells. This is the balance: personal responsibility and structural responsibility, inner freedom and public justice, moral courage and institutional reform. Without personal responsibility, people excuse every cruelty by blaming the system. Without structural responsibility, people blame victims for reacting to traps they did not build. A mature society needs both. It must say, yes, people are responsible for what they do, and yes, systems are responsible for what they repeatedly produce. This is especially important in post-colonial societies. If people keep fighting along tribal, religious, regional, or class lines, we must not simply insult them. We must ask what makes those lines politically profitable. Who gains votes from fear? Who gains contracts from loyalty? Who gains silence from division? Who gains impunity when citizens cannot unite around common standards? Who gains when public anger is redirected away from corruption and toward identity conflict? Who gains when people believe that justice for another group means loss for their own? These questions expose the farmer, but exposure alone is not enough. The well must also be redesigned. A country cannot heal only by condemning division. It must build institutions that reduce the usefulness of division, courts that people trust, schools that teach shared citizenship, media that checks propaganda instead of amplifying it, public services distributed fairly, political parties that compete on policy, not hatred, local leadership that protects people from manipulation, economic opportunity that reduces desperation, historical education that tells the truth without creating new hatred. These are not small things. They are the architecture of escape, because when the well becomes a country, escape cannot be individual only. One person may survive, one person may become rich, one person may leave, one person may get promoted, one person may find a rope. But if the structure remains, the well continues producing last mice. That is why the goal is not only personal success. The goal is collective awakening. A person who escapes poverty but despises the poor has not fully escaped the well. A politician who comes from oppression but uses oppression has not fully escaped the well. A worker who survives a toxic office and then becomes a toxic manager has not fully escaped the well. A community that survives discrimination and then discriminates against others has not fully escaped the well. A nation that defeats colonial rule but keeps colonial methods of domination has not fully escaped the well. The well has only changed owners. This is the deeper danger. Sometimes people think revolution means replacing the farmer. But real liberation means destroying the logic of the well. It means refusing to govern through fear, refusing to build power through division, refusing to make dignity scarce, refusing to use identity as a weapon, refusing to reward betrayal, refusing to profit from confusion, refusing to turn wounded people into instruments. This is not easy because the old method works, divide and rule works, propaganda works, fear works, scapegoating works, manufactured competition works. That is why people keep using them. But what works for control destroys the human spirit. A country can be controlled and still be dying. A workplace can be productive and still be sick. A family can remain together and still be full of fear. A political party can win elections and still destroy citizenship. A platform can grow and still damage public life. A leader can remain in power and still leave behind a country of last mice. So we must ask a different question. Not only does the strategy work, but what kind of people does it produce? What kind of society does it leave behind? What kind of soul survives it? Because the final measure of power is not only whether it wins. The final measure is what it turns human beings into. This chapter began with the image of a country becoming a well. It has shown that divide and rule is not only an old phrase. It can become colonial policy. It can become post-colonial politics. It can become propaganda. It can become workplace culture. It can become family structure. It can become digital design. It can become a way of life. But it has also shown something hopeful. If wells are designed, they can be redesigned. If rivalry can be produced, cooperation can also be produced. If identities can be weaponized, they can also be humanized. If fear can be spread, trust can be rebuilt. If people can be taught to look sideways with hatred, they can also be taught to look upward with clarity and outward with responsibility. The danger is real, but so is the possibility of escape. The next chapter must therefore move from history to our present world. Because today, the well is not only colonial, it is not only political, it is also digital. It lives in the phone. It lives in the feed. It lives in the algorithm that learns what angers us, what humiliates us, what divides us, and what keeps us watching. The modern farmer may not always stand above a stone well. Sometimes he sits inside a system that turns attention into profit. And the bait is no longer a dead pig. Sometimes the bait is outrage. Chapter 8. The digital well, the old well, was made of stone. The modern well glows in your hand. It has no visible walls. It does not smell of dust, blood, or death. It does not look like a prison. It looks like entertainment. It looks like connection. It looks like information. It looks like opportunity. It looks like a place where everyone can speak, everyone can be seen, everyone can build a name, everyone can find an audience, everyone can become important. That is the genius of the digital well. It does not feel like a trap when you enter it. It feels like the world opening. A person picks up a phone and enters a place where millions of voices are speaking at once. News, jokes, advice, scandals, politics, religion, fashion, success, beauty, money, relationships, tragedy, war, motivation, humiliation, outrage. Every emotion is there. Every desire is there. Every insecurity is there. Every comparison is there. Every wound is there. The phone becomes a small door into a massive human arena. And like the mice entering the well because they smelled meat, people enter the digital world because they smell something they need. Attention, recognition, belonging, information, money, entertainment, connection, validation, escape, a chance to be seen, a chance to matter. At first, it feels like freedom, but soon many people discover that the digital world does not only connect human beings, it also arranges them, it ranks them, it compares them, it rewards them. It punishes them, it tempts them, it studies them, it learns what keeps them watching, it learns what angers them, it learns what embarrasses them, it learns what makes them jealous, it learns what they fear, it learns what they desire, it learns what makes them return. And slowly, without change, the person becomes captured, not always by one evil individual. Not always by a single farmer standing above the well, sometimes by a system, a design, an incentive, an algorithm, a market built on attention. The digital well is different from the old well because the bait is everywhere. Every notification is a small piece of meat. Every like is a small piece of meat. Every comment is a small piece of meat. Every share is a small piece of meat. Every follower is a small piece of meat. Every viral post is a small piece of meat. Every trending topic is a small piece of meat. Every public argument is a small piece of meat. Every moment of outrage is a small piece of meat. And people keep jumping. Not because they are foolish, but because the bait speaks to deep human needs. Human beings want to be seen. That is not wrong. Human beings want to belong. That is not wrong. Human beings want to be respected. That is not wrong. Human beings want their pain to be heard. That is not wrong. Human beings want their work to matter. That is not wrong. The danger begins when these natural needs are placed inside a system that profits from keeping them unsatisfied. A hungry person returns for food. A lonely person returns for connection. An insecure person returns for validation. An angry person returns for confirmation. A humiliated person returns for revenge. A creator returns for views. A citizen returns for political certainty. A believer returns for moral superiority. A wounded person returns for someone to blame. The digital well does not always give people healing. It often gives them stimulation. And stimulation can look like life while quietly draining the soul. This is where George Orwell becomes useful again, but with a modern twist. In 1984, the 2 minutes hate was scheduled. People gathered at a certain time, watched the enemy on a screen, and released their anger together. In the digital world, the 2 minutes hate no longer needs a schedule. It is available all day. Every hour there is someone to hate. Someone has said something foolish. Someone has been exposed. Someone has failed. Someone has been misunderstood. Someone has been accused. Someone has become the symbol of everything people already resent. The crowd gathers quickly, not physically. Digitally, comments become stones, shares become public punishment, memes become weapons, screenshots become evidence, rumors become trials, and the person being attacked may not even be the real cause of anyone's suffering. But for a moment, the crowd feels united. That is the scapegoat mechanism in digital form. René Girard would recognize it. A community under tension seeks a victim. The victim carries the anger of many. The group attacks. The group feels clean for a moment. Then the feeling fades. Another victim is needed. Another outrage is needed. Another enemy is needed. The digital well must keep feeding. It cannot allow people to remain satisfied for too long, because satisfaction is bad for attention. Peace is quiet, wisdom is slow, understanding takes time, but outrage is fast, humiliation is fast, fear is fast, envy is fast, mockery is fast, and whatever is fast travels well in the digital well. This is one of the great dangers of our age. The emotions that spread fastest are not always the emotions that make us wiser. A lie can travel with drama. Truth often arrives with context. A rumor can be exciting, correction can be boring, a false accusation can feel righteous, investigation can feel slow, a simple enemy can unite a crowd, a complex explanation can divide attention. This is why the digital well is so powerful. It rewards speed before depth, reaction before reflection, identity before truth, performance before wisdom, visibility before character. And once people learn the reward system, they begin to adapt. A creator learns that calm reflection may receive little attention, but outrage travels. A political voice learns that fear mobilizes faster than policy. A gossip page learns that humiliation creates engagement. A public figure learns that conflict keeps them relevant. A young person learns that beauty, wealth, drama, or controversy can create visibility. A community learns that being offended together feels like belonging. Slowly, people do not simply use the platform, they are trained by it. Every system teaches. The digital system teaches people what gets rewarded. If patience is ignored and anger is rewarded, anger grows. If nuance is ignored and exaggeration is rewarded, exaggeration grows. If humility is ignored and performance is rewarded, performance grows. If reconciliation is ignored and conflict is rewarded, conflict grows. If truth is ignored and drama is rewarded, drama grows. This does not mean social media is only evil. That would be false. The digital world has helped people learn, organize, create businesses, expose injustice, find communities, build careers, share knowledge, raise money, teach skills, comfort strangers, and speak when traditional institutions ignored them. Many people have used digital platforms for good. A small creator can reach a global audience. A teacher can educate thousands. A business can find customers. A witness can expose abuse. A community can mobilize help. A lonely person can find belonging. A student can access knowledge that was once locked away. The digital world is not only a well, it can also be a bridge. But that is exactly why it is dangerous. The best traps often contain real benefits. If the digital world gave nothing useful, people would leave. The bait works because it is partly real. There is real information, real opportunity, real connection, real creativity, community, real money, real learning, real justice. But mixed into these benefits is a powerful structure of capture. The question is not, is the internet good or bad? The better question is, what kind of human being does this digital environment train me to become? Does it make me wiser, or only more reactive? Does it make me informed, or only more certain? Does it connect me to others, or only connect me to people who confirm my anger? Does it make me courageous, or only performative? Does it make me compassionate, or only morally superior? Does it help me understand the world, or only select enemies for me? Does it strengthen my attention, or break it into pieces? Does it help me escape the well, or decorate the walls? This is where Thomas Hobbes enters the digital age. Hobbes described a condition where people live in suspicion, insecurity, and fear of one another. The digital world can create a soft version of that condition. Everyone watches everyone. Everyone judges everyone. Everyone compares. Everyone performs. Everyone fears being misunderstood. Everyone fears being left behind. Everyone fears being invisible. Everyone fears public shame. Everyone fears exclusion from the group. The result is not always physical violence. Sometimes it is psychological war, a war of comments, a war of status, a war of identity, a war of screenshots, a war of public image, a war of constant comparison, a war where the battlefield is attention, and the wounds are invisible. People begin to live as if they are always being watched. They curate themselves, they edit themselves, they measure themselves, they brand themselves, they defend themselves, they attack before being attacked, they apologize before understanding. They perform certainty even when they are confused. They join the crowd because silence feels dangerous. The digital well turns life into a stage and then punishes people for forgetting their lines. This creates a new kind of fear, not the fear of death like in the old well, the fear of social death, the fear of being mocked, the fear of being cancelled, the fear of being ignored, the fear of being exposed, the fear of being irrelevant, the fear of seeing others move ahead while you remain unseen. This fear may not kill the body, but it can weaken the soul. It can make people anxious, bitter, restless, jealous, suspicious, and hungry for validation. And once again, the person beside you becomes the nearest target. Another creator's success feels like your failure. Another woman's beauty feels like your invisibility. Another man's wealth feels like your humiliation. Another student's achievement feels like your inadequacy. Another business's growth feels like your defeat. Another person's relationship feels like evidence that your life is behind. Comparison turns the digital world into a crowded well. Everyone is looking sideways. Everyone is measuring. Everyone is asking why them? Why not me? Why are they seen? Why am I ignored? Why did they go viral? Why did I fail? Why are they praised? Why am I forgotten? René Girard's mimetic desire is everywhere in this world. People do not only want things. They want what appears desirable because others desire it. A lifestyle becomes desirable because it is displayed. A body becomes desirable because it is admired. A relationship becomes desirable because it is envied. A career becomes desirable because it receives applause. A product becomes desirable because influencers touch it. A place becomes desirable because others photograph themselves there. The digital world multiplies desire by multiplying mirrors. You are not only comparing yourself to your neighbor, you are comparing yourself to thousands of carefully edited lives. This creates artificial scarcity. There may be enough dignity in the world, but online dignity begins to feel scarce because attention is scarce. There may be enough beauty in different forms, but online beauty begins to feel scarce because one style is rewarded. There may be enough paths to success, but online success begins to feel narrow because only certain lives are celebrated. There may be enough wisdom in quiet work, but online wisdom begins to feel invisible because noise travels faster. The digital well teaches people to confuse visibility with value. That is dangerous, because once visibility becomes value, invisibility feels like death. People begin to ask not, am I living well, but am I being seen living well? Not, am I becoming wise, but do I appear wise? Not, am I loved, but can people see that I am loved? Not, am I successful, but does my success look impressive enough? This creates a divided self. One self lives, another self performs, one self suffers, another self posts, one self doubts, another self declares certainty, one self wants rest, another self must remain relevant. This is another form of the well entering the person. The walls are no longer outside. They become internal pressure. A person begins to carry the audience inside his own mind. Even when alone, he imagines being seen. Even when resting, he feels behind. Even when succeeding, he compares upward. Even when loved, he wants proof. Even when informed, he wants validation. Even when angry, he wants witnesses. This is why the digital well is not only social, it is spiritual. It competes for the inner life. Viktor Frankl's idea of inner freedom becomes very important here. Frankl warned that even under external pressure, the human being must guard the freedom to choose his response. In the digital age, that freedom is constantly under attack, not always by prison guards, but by notifications, by trends, by outrage, by comparison, by the pressure to react, by the fear of silence, by the hunger to be seen, by the need to belong to the loudest group. The modern question becomes, can a person still choose his response when every system around him is designed to provoke reaction? Can a person pause before commenting? Can a person refuse to share a rumor? Can a person resist public cruelty even when the crowd is cheering? Can a person watch another person succeed without becoming bitter? Can a person be unseen without feeling worthless? Can a person be misunderstood without surrendering to performance? Can a person hold a complex thought in a world that rewards simple enemies? This is moral freedom in the digital well. It is not dramatic. It may look small, not replying immediately, not joining the mob, not forwarding the false story, not mocking someone's downfall, not measuring your entire life against another person's highlight, not letting an algorithm choose your enemies, not confusing trending anger with truth, not allowing comparison to turn you against your own path. These small acts are not small. They are acts of resistance. Because the digital well survives on automatic reaction. Every time you pause, you weaken it. Every time you ask, who benefits from my anger? You weaken it. Every time you refuse to dehumanize someone for applause, you weaken it. Every time you choose depth over speed, you weaken it. Every time you protect your attention, you protect your freedom. Attention is the new grain. In the old story, the mouse once ate grain. After the well, it hunted mice. In the digital story, the human being once used attention to think, pray, work, love, study, create, and understand. But inside the digital well, attention is harvested. The person's mind becomes a field. Every platform advertiser, influencer, politician, outrage merchant, and content machine wants a piece of it. Your attention is valuable because your attention is your life in motion. What you attend to shapes what you become. If you attend constantly to fear, you become fearful. If you attend constantly to outrage, you become angry. If you attend constantly to comparison, you become insecure. If you attend constantly to humiliation, you become cruel. If you attend constantly to shallow success, you become restless. If you attend constantly to enemies, you become unable to see neighbors. This is why the digital farmer wants attention. Not because attention is harmless, because attention is formative. It forms desire, it forms memory, it forms identity, it forms politics, it forms moral instinct. It forms what people think is normal. A society becomes what it repeatedly watches. A young person becomes what he repeatedly admires. A community becomes what it repeatedly discusses. A nation becomes what it repeatedly fears. This is why the digital well is one of the most powerful wells ever built. It does not need everyone in one physical location. It can trap millions separately. Each person alone with a phone. Each person feeling independent. Each person thinking, I chose this. But underneath, the system is learning. It learns what keeps the person engaged. And often what keeps people engaged is not what heals them. This is where the farmer becomes difficult to identify. In the old parable, the farmer is clear. One person throws the pig. One person watches the well. One person lowers the rope. But in the digital world, the farmer may be scattered. It may be a platform seeking engagement, a political actor buying influence, a media page chasing clicks, a creator farming outrage, a brand manufacturing desire, a group spreading propaganda, a person seeking power through division, a community addicted to conflict, or the user's own unhealed wound looking for confirmation. The farmer is not always outside. Sometimes the farmer is inside the business model. Sometimes inside the algorithm, sometimes inside the crowd, sometimes inside the ego, sometimes inside the wound. That makes the digital well harder to escape, because there is no single rope, there is no single villain, there is no single exit. The well is woven into habits. Wake up and check, feel anxious and scroll, feel lonely and post, feel angry and comment, feel unseen and compare, feel bored and consume, feel confused and seek a group, feel humiliated and find an enemy. This is not merely technology use, it is emotional conditioning. The person begins to use the digital world not only for information but for regulation of the self. When sad, scroll. When insecure, compare. When angry, attack. When empty, consume. When lonely, perform. When uncertain, join a crowd. The platform becomes a teacher of emotional reflex. This is why we must be careful about what kind of digital habits we build. Because habits become character. And character becomes destiny. If a person practices outrage every day, outrage becomes easier. If a person practices envy every day, envy becomes natural. If a person practices mockery every day, compassion weakens. If a person practices comparison every day, gratitude dies. If a person practices shallow reaction every day, deep thought becomes difficult. If a person practices seeing others as categories every day, humanity becomes harder to recognize. The digital well is not only taking time, it is training perception. It is teaching people how to see. And if the way we see becomes corrupted, the way we live follows. This is why education in the digital age must include attention. A person who cannot guard attention cannot guard freedom. A person who cannot pause cannot think. A person who cannot think can be led by any emotion. A person led by emotion can be turned into a weapon. A person turned into a weapon may believe he is expressing himself while serving someone else's design. This is the same lesson as the parable. Many people spend their lives trying to defeat others online without realizing they are already part of someone else's game. They fight in comment sections. They join endless identity wars. They mock strangers, they destroy reputations, they chase validation, they envy people they do not know, they hate groups they have never listened to, they repeat slogans they did not examine, they perform outrage for audiences that do not love them. And above all this, someone profits, not always one person, but someone benefits. Attention is monetized, anger is monetized. Division is monetized, insecurity is monetized, loneliness is monetized, desire is monetized, the mice fight, the platform grows, the citizens rage, the political actor gains, the young compare, the advertiser sells, the crowd attacks, the outrage page collects engagement, the person loses peace, the system receives attention. This is the digital form of the farmer's victory. But again, we must not fall into hopelessness. The digital well can be resisted, not by abandoning technology completely. For many people, that is not realistic. The digital world is part of work, learning, business, politics, communication, and creativity. The answer is not simple rejection. The answer is conscious use. Use the bridge without becoming trapped in the well. How? First, name the bait. Ask yourself, what is pulling me in? Is it learning or validation? Is it connection or comparison? Is it justice or outrage addiction? Is it creativity or fear of invisibility? Is it information or emotional stimulation? A trap loses power when the bait is named. Second, study the reward system. What does this space reward me for becoming? Does it reward honesty or performance? Does it reward patience or instant reaction? Does it reward humility or arrogance? Does it reward wisdom or controversy? Does it reward building or attacking? Every platform has a hidden curriculum. It teaches through rewards. Learn the curriculum before it shapes you unconsciously. Third, slow down your reactions. The digital well wants speed, but wisdom often needs time. Before sharing, ask, is it true? Is it complete? Is it necessary? Am I helping understanding or only feeding anger? Before commenting, ask, would I say this to a human being face to face? Am I correcting or humiliating? Am I seeking truth or applause? Before joining an outrage, ask, who benefits if I become angry right now? Is this anger attached to facts or to a crowd? Fourth, protect your attention. Not all content deserves entry into your mind. The mind is not a public dumping ground. It is a sacred field. What enters it repeatedly grows there. Choose teachers carefully. Choose voices carefully. Choose pages carefully. Choose conversations carefully. Choose what you admire carefully, because admiration is not neutral. What you admire, you begin to imitate. Girard would warn us here. Desire follows models. If you constantly admire shallow success, you may become shallow. If you constantly admire cruelty, you may become cruel. If you constantly admire outrage, you may become addicted to conflict. If you constantly admire wisdom, discipline, courage, generosity, and truth, those desires also grow. The digital well can train rivalry, but it can also train excellence if used consciously. Fifth, recover real community. Digital connection is not always the same as human presence. A like is not the same as love. A comment is not the same as counsel. Followers are not the same as friends. Virality is not the same as belonging. Visibility is not the same as being known. Human beings need spaces where they are not only performing. They need people who know them beyond their image. They need conversations that are not for an audience. They need elders, friends, families, mentors, faith communities, learning communities, and honest relationships where truth can be spoken without public theater. The farmer fears real community because real community compares notes. Real community says, are you also feeling anxious? Are you also being made angry? Are you also comparing yourself? Are you also tired of performing? Are you also beginning to hate people you do not know? Are we being used? Once people ask these questions together, the well becomes visible. Sixth, create more than you consume. Consumption can trap a person in endless comparison. Creation gives attention direction, but even creation must be guarded. Create to serve, teach, build, express, repair, inspire, and tell the truth, not only to chase applause. A creator who becomes a slave to engagement is still inside the well. He may look successful, but he is controlled by the crowd. He begins by sharing truth. Then he learns what gets views. Then he bends truth for views. Then he becomes a servant of the appetite he once hoped to guide. That is another form of becoming the last mouse. The creator escapes invisibility, but loses integrity. This is why creators must ask, am I using the platform, or is the platform using me? Am I shaping attention towards something meaningful, or am I being shaped by the hunger for attention? Am I helping people think, or only making them react? Am I building a bridge or decorating the well? Seventh, refuse digital dehumanization. Behind every profile is a person. Not always a good person, not always an innocent person, not always a person who should be trusted, but still a person. Digital distance makes cruelty easy. You do not see the face fully. You do not hear the breathing. You do not see the family. You do not know the wound. You do not know the whole story. You see a post, a sentence, a clip, a mistake, a rumor, a label. Then judgment comes quickly. This does not mean people should not be challenged. Wrong ideas should be challenged. Harmful actions should be named. Injustice should be exposed. But there is a difference between accountability and public feeding. Accountability seeks truth and repair. Public feeding seeks emotional satisfaction through another person's humiliation. The digital well loves public feeding. It turns human beings into meat for the crowd. Today one person is fed to the timeline. Tomorrow another. The crowd eats and calls it justice. But after eating, the hunger returns. This is how you know it was not justice alone. Justice brings responsibility. Feeding brings appetite. If our anger always needs another body, we are not free. We are being trained. This is one of the most serious warnings of the digital age. Do not let the internet make you enjoy cruelty. Once you begin to enjoy the humiliation of others, the well has entered you. Once you need someone to fall every day so you can feel alive, the well has entered you. Once another person's shame becomes your entertainment, the well has entered you. Once you cannot distinguish correction from destruction, the well has entered you. Once you call every target evil so you do not have to feel mercy, the well has entered you. The last mouse now has Wi-Fi. It hunts in comments, it hunts in quote posts, it hunts in gossip channels, it hunts in anonymous accounts, it hunts through screenshots, it hunts through rumors, it hunts through moral language, it hunts with the confidence of someone who believes cruelty is truth. But the tragedy remains the same. The hunter is still trapped, maybe not in the old well, but in a mind shaped by the well. So what does escape look like? Escape does not mean never using the phone. Escape means recovering authority over your attention. Escape means refusing enemies selected by algorithms. Escape means choosing truth over speed. Escape means choosing depth over constant stimulation. Escape means choosing real community over performative belonging. Escape means creating without becoming addicted to applause. Escape means criticizing without dehumanizing. Escape means staying informed without becoming possessed by outrage. Escape means seeing another person's success without treating it as your death. Escape means asking again and again, what is this space turning me into? That question is the rope, not the full escape, but the beginning. Because a person cannot leave a trap he refuses to recognize. The digital well is powerful because it hides inside normal life. It is in the morning routine. It is in the lunch break. It is in the bedroom. It is in the taxi. It is in the office. It is in the classroom. It is in the church compound. It is in the political rally. It is in the family group chat. It is in the quiet moment before sleep. It is always near. That nearness makes it difficult to see, but once seen, it can be used differently. The phone can become a tool again, not a master. The platform can become a bridge again, not a well. Attention can become a gift again, not grain stolen from the soul. The person can become human again, not a mouse hunting other mice for validation. This is the task of the modern age, not only to survive online, but to remain whole, to remain capable of thought, to remain capable of mercy, to remain capable of slow truth, to remain capable of real friendship, to remain capable of joy that does not need an audience, to remain capable of success that does not require comparison, to remain capable of anger that serves justice instead of addiction, to remain capable of seeing the human being behind the label. The old farmer used a dead pig. The modern system uses outrage, envy, comparison, fear, and attention. The old well trapped bodies. The digital well traps perception. The old mice fought in darkness. The modern mice fight in public, watched by millions. The old survivor came out hunting its own kind. The modern survivor may come out with followers, influence, and a sharpened instinct for public attack. But the question remains the same. Did you escape, or did you become useful to the well? The next time your hand reaches for the phone, do not only ask what you want to see, ask what wants to shape you. The next time anger rises from a post, do not only ask what was said, ask who benefits from your reaction. The next time envy rises from another person's life, do not only ask why they are ahead, ask whether comparison is stealing your gratitude. The next time the crowd chooses a victim, do not only ask whether joining will feel good, ask whether the crowd is seeking justice or feeding. The next time you feel invisible, do not offer your soul cheaply for attention. The next time you feel pressured to perform, remember that visibility is not the same as worth. And the next time the digital world tells you to hate someone, pause long enough to ask, is this my enemy? Or is this the person the well wants me to eat? That pause may save your humanity. Because in the digital age, freedom does not begin when the screen goes dark. Freedom begins when consciousness turns on. The well is not only beneath us now, it is around us. It is inside our habits. It is inside our reactions. It is inside our feeds. It is inside the economy of attention. But the human being is not helpless. We can still choose. We can still pause. We can still think. We can still refuse. We can still build. We can still speak truth without becoming cruel. We can still use technology without worshiping attention. We can still create without becoming slaves to applause. We can still disagree without becoming enemies. We can still feel anger without surrendering judgment. We can still live in a noisy age with a quiet center. That quiet center is precious. Guard it, because whoever controls your attention does not merely control what you see. He begins to control what you love. And whoever controls what you love begins to shape what you become. The farmer knows this. The algorithm knows this. The propagandist knows this. The advertiser knows this. The outrage merchant knows this. The manipulator knows this. So you must know it too. The digital well is real, but so is the possibility of awakening. And once a person awakens, the screen is no longer just a screen. It becomes a mirror. A mirror asking, are you using this world to become more human? Or is this world using you to make humanity disappear?